Good morning, Anthony. So, hello again. We're here to talk about the mental obsession. This is a rough cast, I would say, not a broadcast, in the sense that there's really no format. We're just humans interested in our own well-being so we can be better for others. And I would say that's probably the common bond that we share. A lot of us are sober, and so we have some experience in that, and as a result function on that basis, but are also looking now not just as the symptom of alcohol or drugs or gambling or one of the other conditions that would seem like addictions, but actually looking at the mental aspect of addiction, which in my estimation is thinking about thinking itself as reality. So if I think my thoughts are reality simply because I conclude they're reality and they aren't real, I am putting myself in opposition to reality without thinking about it in those terms and wondering why I'm suffering so many problems. So what Les and I started talking about a minute ago or so is his week, and one of the questions I had was, how did it go? He said, well, and he said, it seems to be going smoothly. I'm watching what I'm doing, sort of observing it. I said, do you notice any resistance? And he said, yes, I do notice some resistance. So I wanted to talk on that point, Les. Good morning, Jenna. I wanted to talk on that point, Les, because I think the witness of that, the way you put it, that you're observing it, you're starting to notice the resistance, while it's easy to think because things are going well that we're not resisting anything, rather than notice that some things are always going well and some things are not going well in terms of the functional interaction we're having on Earth with people, places, and things. And it's okay to observe what's happening as it's happening, rather than try and reinforce the fact that it's not happening because it isn't happening to the degree that it used to be happening. Then all of a sudden we think it's not happening at all. And then when it happens, we seem caught off guard by it. So that's a bit of a segue.
Hey, good morning, Jack. Just real quick, I invited my good friend to go to the mental obsession meeting, and he said, "What's that?" I said, "Do you know what that is?" He goes, "No." I go, "Do you have any mental obsessions?" And he goes, "No." You mean like drinking coffee in the morning like a normal person? So some people don't even know. The fact that you even know what we're talking about is a sign.
Well, we're going to talk about it, despite whether he acknowledges it or not. And part of it was asking Les to continue on that direction that we started with, about observing the resistance and noticing that even while things are well, there tends to be some things that maybe not well. But I think part of the point I wanted to make with you, Les, is that observing it is a lot different than thinking you're in it. So when I think my thoughts are real, I think I'm in my thoughts. I think I am the resistance. I think I am all those things, because I think I become those thoughts rather than as I'm observing them. And it seemed to me that that's what you were saying, that you were just sort of sitting there watching it happen, starting to notice that that's our knowing nature.
Well, I've been mentioning for a while that, in my rudimentary way of meditating, that one of the things that I attempt to try to do, and one of the ways that it made sense to me, was that my thoughts, that I would basically be sitting in a movie theater, that's how old I am, and I would watch, my thoughts would basically be rolling across the screen. And just that mere presence, that mere picture of me being separate from what's on the movie screen allowed me to have my thoughts be separate from what may actually be going on. And it gave me either an objectivity or a distance that allowed me to not accept my thoughts as being the be all end all of what there is. So that same process, now that I am experiencing and had continued discussions here about the mental obsession and the nature of either higher power, reality, universe, etc., that as I go through what I'm going through, I'm now trying to be consciously understanding that I may be having a thought or a feeling and that is not necessarily reality. And therefore, I don't need to act upon it in a certain way, which has allowed me to not be swayed by my thoughts and my emotions when it comes time to either, doing what I expect or need or want to do. And that's, it's diminished what I'll call the power or the belief that thought or emotion I'm having at the moment is necessary to be acted upon, and that is the entire nature of my existence.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're describing is the idea of being in the thought where there's nothing else you can do but act on the thought, and also noticing the thought, which means you're observing the thought. You can't be in the thought if you're observing the thought, right?
Correct.
And my contention, if it's a contention at all, and it seems to be in certain cases, because it doesn't, this isn't easy to swallow, because it seems too much to comprehend. It seems like a lot to take when we begin to discuss the idea that the basis of our existence may be in perfect order and may be a level of knowing that's well beyond our capacity to think. And yet, if that isn't an option because it's absolute, the only thing that's ever conflicting with that is the thinking we're doing about it. And so I want to propose something to you, Les, and this isn't, again, this isn't a discounting of what you're saying, your experience, or any of it, but a chance to just look at it and consider it, sort of like the mariners of old thought the horizon was the edge of doom, and as a result never sailed toward it. And the irony was that nothing beyond it disappeared when they thought it wasn't there. And when they finally approached it, they realized, because they're on a sphere, they can never get to it. It keeps moving away, moving away. Further they move toward it, the further it seems to move away. So that idea of doom had nothing to do with reality and everything to do with what they thought about what they were seeing.
You say that it's complicated. My
What
my
is?
well, you said this process of understanding or accepting this whole juncture of what we're doing through this understanding reality and mental obsession. My initial thought on that was, yeah, the reason it's complicated is because we're trying to break down
Yeah.
the entire way we've been looking at thinking and the emphasis we've been putting on thinking as being reality. I was
Yes.
curious that since
Yes.
we start out as, we start out with trying as babies, whatever, I would wonder what it would be like if in learning and developing both physically, mentally, and otherwise, if some form of perspective or this type of uh, juxtaposition of what maybe, we'll call it reality versus our free thinking, if it would then be so complicated. Because it seems
Well,
like a lot of what we're doing in this conversation is deconstructing what people think today and what's maybe been going on, as you say, for centuries.
so if I said it's complicated, I misspoke. And if I said that, what I meant was we are capable of complicating it by focusing on the thinking that is complicated to camouflage the knowing that is not. So the point that I was getting to with you about the horizon and all that, and Jackie and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, the idea that we don't know simply because we think we don't know would mean, again, thinking is more prevalent and the basis of reality. So if I think I don't know, I don't know. And that's the beginning and the end of it. But if I think I don't know, and there's an absolute knowing presence of awareness that I know and that we know, because it wouldn't be optional, it wouldn't be negotiable, then just like in meditation, I'm not starting to see it. I'm starting to see what I've been doing in my thinking to give me the impression that it wasn't there while it's always been there and I've always known it. So to your point about going back to childhood and starting over, this is our childhood right now. And the chance we have to remedy anything that might have been deficient then is the culmination of this moment right now.
I'm hearing renegotiate my allowance when you say that. I should have got more.
So the potential to use complication as a camouflage is the idea that the thinking about the thinking that is already poisoned and toxic is the source of my continued seeking, while it is the seeking I'm doing that is maintaining the thing I'm looking for as being lost. It isn't lost if it's absolute, can't be lost, so it can't be found. So if it's here and it's now, that state you described when you learned to meditate, started noticing that you could watch your thoughts, wasn't new. It was only new in relation to your willingness and your activity of beginning to actually take a minute out and say, oh, maybe are not my thoughts. Maybe these are just things I'm having. These are things I'm doing. These are things I'm choosing. And for me to make believe those thoughts are reality, I believe I have no choice and I have no other option. And that's what addiction is. All I am is stuck with these thoughts roaming through my brain, constantly, constantly, constantly haunting me, chasing me. And I can't seem to manage them when I'm trying to fix them with the same problem that created them, which is the idea that thinking is reality rather than it's a product of reality. So if that absolute knowing nature, Jackie, to your previous discussion that we had, and we've had this several times, and it takes a minute for this to kind of drop in that sense, it can. It's already here. It already is. Whether we want to see it or not will depend on how we look at it and what we do with our thinking. It's still there in its entirety. It's always here in its entirety. It's not there, it's here. It's not then, it's now. And to begin to concede that, even while you have ideas racing for your attention and craving more and more attention and instigating the idea that all you can do is think more and more about them, and as a result, feel less and less of that comfort of peace and stillness that exists. When you were talking about you're noticing the resistance, you can notice the resistance and not need to act on that resistance when you see it as simply something you're doing in thought. To observe it is not to be it. To be it is to think there's nothing else we can do about it. And that's just a thought, literally. It isn't reality. It's a product of reality. The freedom we have to think about whatever we want is what free will is. And it doesn't mean we can think about things we can't think about, because if there are things we can't think about, we can't think about them. But what it does mean is that we're not obligated to continue thinking about anything. Choice means choosing anything we want and can choose, and also not choosing anything at all. Choice always involves that on a principled basis, on a real basis, on an actual principled basis, not this idea that I can't do anything else. I can only make the wrong choice. Well, it wouldn't be a choice if I could only make it. It would be an instinct. It would be automatic. I wouldn't be thinking about it, and I wouldn't be in emotional turmoil acting on it. It would be saving me rather than condemning me. Morning, Gabe.
Morning, Jack.
So if we share that, and we even give a moment's reprieve to the idea in the midst of our tirade of thoughts and the obsessive thoughts and the ideas we have and the conflicts we want to pose and the doubts all that stuff, if we even consider that is here, is now, is absolute, is still, is perfect, peace, thoughts tend to get the air taken out of them very quickly, like a balloon and a pin. You can't pop the balloon with a bat, but you can do it very quickly with a pinprick. And the pinprick here is just the honesty of looking at what we're looking at without the obsessive. If we're looking at what we're looking at from the obsessive nature of the thinking, we're going to see things as impossible and complicated and difficult and struggle and conflicted. All that's going to come naturally. So since a lie is a reversal of the order, an attempt to reverse the order of nature, if we simply look at the effects, while we claim we don't know what we're doing, we can admit to doing what we're doing to cause those effects and start there. We can start where we are with what we have and always undo and unravel the seeming need to continue to redo and repeat that same idea or thought. Forgiving is letting things be as they are. It's not forsaking, for taking, forgetting, which is all an attempt to make believe they're not as they are. And as a result, we need to get them to be what we think they should be before they are. And in that hailstorm of activity is very, very common, has been, led people to many depraved, depressing, desperate decisions throughout history. To do the wrong thing in the name of trying to make that wrong, that internal wrong that just seems so great, degrading and grating on our experience, right? To finally do the thing, to champion the cause, to finally overcome it, while we're continuing to perpetuate it with that form of thinking. So when you observe those things less, it sounds to me that you're noticing you're not compelled to act on them whatsoever. And not just historically, you've had that experience when it comes to, say, alcohol or drugs or whatever it was that the symptom is. But presently, in terms of noticing the compelling seeming needs we have, to the impulsive needs you may have during the day to act on something quickly as though your life depends on it. Is that close?
That's, of course, yes. It, it seems interesting to me based on my history and my efforts through the program and other learnings, teachings, whatever, that it a lot of this, as I say, is attempting to deconstruct uh, what I had perceived as the power of my mind and thinking, and
Yep.
and therefore, and I only say that in the sense of not recognizing the basis, the fundamental basis, which in a way means that I'm belying or limiting what should be happening as part of my spiritual experience. And once I get to that level, it almost automatically makes it easier or more understanding to where my thoughts have a basis in either choice or reality or however you want to look at it. And that is, the easy way was when I started saying, well, I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. I don't want to be angry. I want to be pleasant. I don't want to be mean. I want to be of service. And it sounds like it's so simple, and yet it's not. Or it apparently appears to be not, or I feel it's not, or think it's not. And the truth is that whenever I get caught into that kind of conundrum of this or that, I'm really looking at it by basically playing pickleball tennis with my own thoughts, as compared to starting from a position of everything is the way it is, everything is the way it's supposed to be, everything is the way it always has been, the all-powerful, omnipotent, all-knowing, all-comforting reality is only this moment, etc. If I could start from there, and I don't want to say build up, but with an acceptance or an understanding, then my thoughts and my feelings, I can understand, have been a choice of my own generation for the most part. And why can I not use the same either reflexive or contemplative power of thought to release it and be more in tune with what has been ongoing since the beginning of time? And it allows me to not so much ignore things, but it puts things in a perspective that which becomes difficult or I don't want to do or is causing me an unhappy or unpleasant emotion that maybe, just maybe, I can see it from a different angle, either do what I need to do to diminish it, or do what I need to do to understand the danger or risk that's involved in it or going forward. And that is freeing in many ways, but not an easy way to start my approach, because my basic approach to thinking is reflexive, rudimentary, binary, attack, defend, right, wrong. And that
Reactive.
really, yes, reactive.
I
There
think
you
that's
go.
the reactivity, impulsivity, compulsivity. That seems to be the order. If I'm operating in a defensive basis, it's because I'm defending with the defensive thought, the thought that I'm trying to protect. I'm creating this insane environment and making believe it's reality because it seems so all consuming in my experience. So I'm intoxicated with the chemicals I'm releasing, the adrenaline that I'm releasing in my body, because it's my body says there's a major problem here. We're trying to deal with insanity, trying to deal with something that isn't even happening. But all I know to do is release all of the bodily chemicals that would generally deal with the threat.
It's interesting that you say that I'm trying to protect the thought. The insanity is that I come from a basis that that thought is reality, and you're
Yes,
attacking my reality. And so I'm using my thinking to help you and to help me preserve that reality.
yes, exactly. That's exactly what the defense is. And what's interesting is we don't think of it as something we're doing. We think of it as something happening by other people who are threatening us. So the talk we're having is to start noticing that it isn't what other people do that seems to have us react. It's the fact that we're maintaining reactivity, literally nuclear reactivity. The nuclear family becomes the enemy, because anyone who thinks anything different than I think subjects me, or that seeming life I have in that thought of that self I think I am, is at risk. When in fact, all that's at risk is the thought I'm having that has no basis, that is at risk the moment I imagine it's true. Immediately, I can create the conditions to use circumstance as the excuse, consequences the excuse, other people, places, and things as the excuse. They're hurting me, they're triggering me, they're toxic. All of a sudden, I don't become toxic. I forget. Forgiving is forgiving things as they are. Forgetting is thinking of things as I take them to be. And what do? You mentioned it. I ignore this to claim this is all that exists, and ignoring is the basis of ignorance. So I'm trying to dumb down my experience by becoming unintelligible in my approach to life and wondering why it seems so complicated. Now, I'll mention this too. It may take a breath, it may take a week, but consider this. All of those reactions, all of those complicated seeming impossibilities that we seem to be so hamstrung on maintaining, are all reflections of knowing better. If we didn't know better, none of those things would seem to be afflictions. None of those things would seem to be wrong. None of those things would seem to be filled with fear and loathing. None of them. There would be no struggle. It would align with our existence and our nature. It doesn't. And so my experience has been, when I started noticing that all of those things that I thought were things I shouldn't be doing were actually the things that were identifying the doing I was doing and thinking was real. And all I was doing was experiencing the deficiency of that thinking, not the deficiency of life, not a separation from life and love and any of the basic elements of an essence that's absolute. I was simply consumed in my own thinking about that thinking that gave that impression, but impressions become depressing the longer they're maintained. There's the anxiety and the stress and the breakdown. You talked about trying to break it down. We've been breaking down emotionally and having nervous breakdowns, bearing this weight of trying to think we need to understand reality any more than simply conceding it's real. We don't need to understand anything about it other than that to fully grasp it, to fully have it, because we already have it. If we didn't have it, it would be something new. It can seem new in relation to that other thinking, but something that doesn't have a beginning or end can't be old. So it's always just simply a present state of being, a present state of awareness that we have now, right now. And when I don't have that way, I think I have to have other things to fill the hole I create by making believe reality is no longer real, and all reality is what I make believe it is. So we're getting all the feedback we need to notice the wrong we're doing. And it isn't because we're condemned to it. It's because we don't want to see it for what it is that gives us the impression that it continues. You're talking about deconstructing. Undoing is certainly not redoing. And the repetition of the thinking of obsessive thinking is trying to turn that thinking into reality, which it's never going to happen. It's all imagination. And while imagination is a great asset, it turns into a huge liability while we make believe that fantasy is going to someday be reality. And to notice this is going to start to feel the weight that our bodies have been bearing and the anxiety and the stress and the tension and the charge that we've been resisting that's built up in our systems because it's going somewhere. There are no secrets in this universe. Everything that's happening is affecting everything that's happening all the time. So we can make believe it's not happening and affecting us while it's having an effect on us. We can make believe we don't know while we know. I would say that's a misuse of our contemplative advantage to be able to think about our thinking and think about life and think about experience and think about each other in multiple ways. To undermine it by setting our bodies off in an emergency state that instinct would do everything to try to avoid is to create this internal dialogue that just goes on and on and on and on. And we have multiple growing names listing the nervous disorders that are coming out of this and the anxious disorders, the fractured states of mind that are developing. And they're really just thoughts. They're not even mind, it's just the brain. If we meditate to find peace and always find it, it may be worth noting it's always where we are. It's the state of existence for all things, all that are and all that is. Just that way. That's it. I don't have to believe in it. I don't have to have faith in it to know it. And if I have a little bit of faith and a little bit of belief of what's actually known, I don't need any more than that to begin to apply it and express it and function on the basis of it with stability and inspiration rather than instability and desperation, or the desperation of instability. If we collectively can talk about that and turn the tendency of talking about the things that are wrong in fractured senses to an absolute commitment to speaking about what is right in all instances, the natural outflow of that basis will be inspired, intuitive wisdom that would otherwise seem unrecognizable and incomprehensible. It would come naturally because it's here now in all of its splendor, wisdom, awareness, in all respects. And the only faltering is the thinking about it we do that we think defines it, rather than simply defines the thinking we think about it. And start to get off that seeming high horse that has never gotten us to the high point we thought it might. So how would we do that collectively?
Well, that's an interesting question, but again, I think it starts in the basis of accepting, recognizing, believing, being okay with that reality is reality, that there is no everything is the way it's meant to be, has been and will be, etc. Once
Mhm.
you cross once we cross that or once we accept that position, once we cross whatever difficulties we have thinking about it or the power of things other than that, then it becomes a lot easier. But part of this journey that I've noticed over time is um, understanding what is reality, accepting what is reality, putting it in position of what other people's thoughts may be with regard to either science or religion or spirituality, etc. Not even looking at the delusion or incompleteness or incorrectness of one's way of thinking to get there. But once that process, it's it's kind of like every on an individual basis, it's always like, why is it that, at least my experience has been, I'm resistant to making certain changes because either I don't want to do it, I'm afraid of the consequences, and I'll pause, I'll procrastinate, I'll create unrealistic thoughts of what may or may not happen. And then once I make the change, or once I do it, I realize, well, number one, it wasn't that big a leap or big a movement or hard thing to do. And the question is, why did I have so much mental then slash emotional trepidation, if not anxiety, for doing what I knew I needed to do or wanted to do in the first place?
So let's
And
use that. That's a perfect description of exactly what I'm proposing we do together collectively. If I think I need to wait for it, I'm not thinking about the present properly, because everything that's here, if I'm thinking some consequences of, I'm afraid of a consequence, I'm using an excuse to avoid the fear I have about the thought I'm having now about reality. It is in the future, as you described. Once you take the action, you realize that all those fears were completely unfounded. If we know that in these circumstantial ways, then we know that in the present way. And if I'm not thinking in thinking terms, but beginning to notice my knowing awareness, I don't need to concede that reality is real for it to be real. And I don't need to accept it for it to be real. I don't need to understand it for it to be real. I don't need to do anything for it to be real. And that's the ultimate freedom of exactly what you're describing, Les. The idea, my suspicion is most of what I struggle with are the thoughts I don't think I'm having, and as a result have nothing to do with, and as a result think there's nothing I can do anything about. That's what I think Jana and I talked about that as being the unholy trinity. I'm not doing it. I have nothing to do with it as a result. It's happening to me, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's a very contemptful sense of condemnation that's all generated within our own experience. Nothing out there is any greater than we think about it in our own brain. If I wasn't thinking about it incorrectly, I wouldn't be struggling with it. If I was thinking about it correctly, I would recognize it need not be thought of to be. Whatever it is as it is, regardless. And now I have a relationship where I not only think I can give up thinking I need to define those things, I can begin receiving those things and have those things introduce themselves, whatever they are, selves or otherwise, to me, as they have been, as they are, part of this interactive relationship we have with everything. If I need to understand it, I think then I've done the thing to get me there, to finally have it. And again, I'm trying to take credit for it in the same addictive way I thought that drinking more, getting more, having more, all those things would finally fill the hole that is constantly, we're talking about a hole that's built in non-existent, something that doesn't operate in reality. Fantasy as reality is something that doesn't exist. It's only thought to exist. Just like any idea we have that is wrong, thinking it's right has no basis in reality at all, only in this idea that we have about thoughts being real. So if it's here, regardless of what we think, and regardless of how we think of it, and regardless of how we understand, and regardless of anything we do, and it is present, it is the basis of our capacity to even have this conversation right now. And two, anyone anywhere listening and everyone everywhere not listening, same thing, because it doesn't change. That dynamic that seems to be so specific to some thing somewhere else, some other place, some other time, is in fact the presence of the present, now, here. And if that's the case, we can go out on a limb and never fall off, because the limb is only an imagined narrative for the idea that we're going beyond the limits of our thinking, beyond the limits of our understanding, beyond the limits of our comprehension. And all of those things being limited can't possibly be infinite within the confines of those limits we maintain. And yet they are within the realm of the infinite being made believe to be reality. Major conflict, only in mentality, not reality. So the question is, are we here? Let's start there. Are we here now? Each of us. Or are we only where we think we are?
I'm here.
I know.
Or well, you gave me an option after that. Or we think we are. I'm like, damn it! I should have answered before there was an option.
Well, the I, Anthony, when we think about that sentence, I am thinking to myself, I am thinking about myself, it's really a split personality. It's the idea that I am not
Bingo! Now
about.
we're talking mental obsession. That's where we're getting to. This is where it gets interesting.
So I can't describe it enough to replace your experience of it, nor anyone else's. It's not my words. It's not the way I put things in order. I've talked about this a lot, but
What
that
does
doesn't make it.
justification mean anyway? That's where I got stuck on that word like an hour ago. Justification. What?
Grab a dictionary.
It's like a loophole.
I knew I liked it. I'm like, this guy's. I wish I was like less more. I wish I was like less more.
There are no justifications for your behavior. Knock it off.
So are we
that's
all?
an interesting point. You know, I'll just talk a little bit about this justification. It's the same misunderstanding, misuse, belief. We justify people, me, I justify things in order to have it make sense to me or to believe that either my actions, thoughts, or behaviors are appropriate or in alignment with either what I want, what I believe is correct, what I believe is right. But because I'm using my thoughts, basically I'm in that loop of not looking at what may be absolute existence and reality.
Oh,
I'm basically evolving in my quote universe around what I think should be happening, why things did happen, and what will happen. And so I justify it, which has no basis in reality. It's a justification as compared to an acceptance. And therefore, as Jana said, let it go. Because as soon as I start to justify I'm already putting power or belief in
Yeah.
that which is my thoughts and not reality.
Well, you wouldn't need to justify reality because there's no justification for it.
That's why I use reality as, I hate to say it, almost a separation, because
Yeah.
this whole conversation is us doing some form of either mental gymnastics, aerobics, or I don't know, I could use less flattering terms as compared to, like I told you, that's the Rubicon, just starting from everything is the way it is and is supposed to be, has been, and will be, regardless of how I view, think, or want things to be. And then from that basis, I can develop a way of living that's okay with the not only the either harsh or natural way of life, but also with my free choices and thinking that I do along the way, so that either both that I am not either disturbed, angry, upset, and likewise, I am not taking, harming, and doing a disservice to others in the process.
Well, anything less than love is a justification. And usually when that happens, that's when you find a co-conspirator to explain your plight and loophole out of anything less than love.
Woo!
Or to use them as an excuse.
Or to back me up, because then I feel guilty because I just bitched out some 90-year-old because they cut me off in their electric car. And then I say, well, they cut me off, like it was justified. It's never justified, ever. Anything less than love is not justifiable.
Well, you can justify it, but it doesn't make it right. I mean, that's the whole part.
I can weave the story.
The real freedom here is noticing we can actually freely do all these things we're doing that give us this contemptful condemnation, leads to addiction, compulsion, suicide, hate, violence, murder. All these other things are all possibilities which we are well aware of. That's human history. It's written in the books. Consistently, we find that through human history. People who thought they were in charge of all other people ended up not being in charge of anybody, most often. And if it wasn't them, it was the successors that took over after them. Because it's all imagined. It's all vanity. It's all grandiosity. It's all just delusion.
Fear. It's all fear, every inch of it.
Well, and think about induced fear as being an awareness. If fear is the guidance system of our instincts to help us avoid risks, think of the brilliance of that seeming self-centered, what we call self-centered fear, as a recognition that something is seriously wrong with that concept. Fear doesn't occur to us because there's no threat. Fear occurs because there is a threat. To think of it simply as no threat because it's only imagined is to miss the anxiety and the stress and the desperation of the decisions we make on that basis that cause all of the calamities and all of the circumstances and all of the conflicts in the world that are completely unjustified, except to the lies we maintain that we justify and rationalize, because rationalization goes along with that. And rationalization is effectively irrational. We can do it and we can use it, and there are purposes for it within the construct of benefiting others and producing and being successful in terms of the actions we take, rather than constantly failing and wondering why we feel things are so scarce and we don't have enough and we need more and get so desperate we make all the wrong decisions even greater. Those are all induced by this same process. So again, the question, are we here now?
Yes. All of us, we are one.
Yeah. So if we are, and that we share is in fact the essence of what allows us to even spend time together and talk about this, we're exercising our contemplative capacity to consider our thinking.
The contemplative advantage.
Yes, good.
I wrote that down.
Well, but keep in mind, when we start thinking our contemplative advantage is creating reality that becomes a major liability because it's never possible. It can't come true. It can't happen. It can't be applied without destructive consequences and damaging consequences. So when I think I'm doing good for others because I do some good for some others, and I'm maintaining those thoughts at the same time, I'm still instilling the grid that we all share, that we're all aware of telepathically or in whatever way we comprehend it physically.
Or
I'm
even by
still
calling them
instilling that
others.
grid with fear. I'm still participating in that conspiratorial idea that I have nothing to do with it because I'm doing some good locally and don't think of anything else. I'm still participating in that.
Well, and even thinking that you're doing something for another when we're all in this together.
Yeah, generally the best thing to do for another is help them realize how to do the thing they think we should be doing for them on their own. That's really
Ah,
the full realization of our capacity. It's not doing it for people. You cripple people.
it's the old
If
fishing story.
what's
Yeah,
Right.
that?
but
The
that does
fishing
nothing to
story.
soothe my ego.
Well,
Oh,
your ego is
that's
imagined.
fear. That's an
That
illusion, a fearful illusion.
So getting back to that point, if the things we're doing, we talk about letting go of, you have to be hanging on to something to let go of it, right?
Yeah.
And if the thing we're hanging on to is a delusion, what are we hanging on to right now?
An illusion.
We think there's something there to hang on to. We're still maintaining the idea it's real. It has space. It takes space. When in fact all it's taking is imagination, which may take some space. But all that's happening, all that's wrong is the thought I'm having now. It's not the one I had then. It's not the length of time I've been doing it. It's not all the consequences that have come from it. It's the thought I have now about it being so intractable, like a stake in the ground. I'm thinking of it in a way that gives it credit that is completely undue. So I'm always seeking more and more credit for what I do, meaning I'm the one that let go and now I can operate better.
Yes.
Fact is, I
Yes.
have never held on to anything that was delusional. It was only a thought there was something to hold on to, which once more references the idea I thought it was real. I still have remnants of that thinking it's real, and there must be something to let go of. I can't seem to identify it. It never seems to appear, but it always seems to be a present conflict in the thinking I'm doing, which indicates I'm still relying on my thinking as reality.
And guess
Now,
what's on the opposite side of delusional, buddy?
Enlighten us.
if there's nothing there,
Perfection. Perfection. Hello.
no,
Enlighten
if there's
us.
nothing there, there isn't anything. The opposite of something absolute is absolute. The opposite of something that doesn't exist doesn't exist. The fact is, we've been treating delusion, our capacity to imagine things, as reality, as fantasy, as reality. That's always
Yeah, so
almost,
reality is just right on the other side of delusional. I mean, come on, that's pretty close, right?
it doesn't go away because we maintain an idea that we're in a tiny bubble of a thought. It's just a thought we're thinking of that we have given so much dominance to and so much credit to that gives us the impression that we're away from reality and that there is no reality. But if reality is infinite, there's no possibility that can come
How can
close to being true.
so reality is infinite, even though it happens one way, it's infinite.
Well, it happens in every way. It makes all possibilities we have possible. It allows for all that freedom to choose absolutely the wrong thing and think it's right. That's a lot of freedom. If we were condemned by that power, it would have never allowed us to choose wrong, and we would always behave like animals, just looking for food, trying to stay warm, procreating, not doing much else. The distinction, while we are animals in certain respects, because we have a very rudimentary system, we have eyes, we share a lot with the animal kingdom, limbs, eyes, bodies, skin. But we have this seeming advantage that we have turned into a major liability by making believe that thinking about thinking itself turns us into the self of thought. And that is not true, won't be true, because truth is true. And the fact that we can imagine things doesn't mean that truth is shy of our imagination. It simply means that when we believe in our imagination as reality, we miss the point of what it is, which is the possibility of considering things beyond the things we have now. We can innovate and we can develop and we can imagine doing things that are all possible. We think things are impossible because they haven't happened. If they're possible, they're not impossible. We just haven't done them. We've given so much credit to thinking as being reality. We literally believe if something hasn't been done, it's impossible, and we've overcome impossibility. Not so. It's always possible if it can be done. Always. That's the guiding mark. Indiction is the idea that more thinking is going to solve the problem, which can never be done. And so what do? Drink more, try more, have more, can't seem to get enough. Why? When enough is not enough, words are completely failing. They become completely irrational because they are. We're looking for more thoughts that are based on the same idea of emptiness, of non-existence, of only existing on the basis of a thought with no substance, thought of more and more and more and more, and wonder why we feel like hell. So if we are all here now, that too is true for all others and all things, presently, intimately, symmetrically, seamlessly, synchronicitously connected in absolute terms, not in relative terms, in absolute terms. But our human experience is relating to those things. And if my awareness in my thinking is of an infinite absolute source and sees the interconnectedness of all things, I can never feel alone. I can feel alone only because I'm thinking thoughts that are lonely, because they have no basis in reality. That's a guidance system to say, oh, I'm having a thought that has no basis. No wonder I feel alone. It's not because everybody's abandoned me and I keep burning people out so that I make sure there aren't any people near me so I can use them to justify my condition, which is another way of saying I have nothing to do with it while I'm the manifester of those conditions because I'm seeing them that way. They don't even have to be there. I can have people all around me and feel alone because I'm trying to support the contention of my thought as being right and real, while in fact I ignore all the circumstances that would tell me otherwise. So to Les's point, when he makes the decision to do the thing he thinks he has to postpone and ignore, all of a sudden it becomes obvious that it never contained all the kernels of the fear. The fear was contained in the idea that was filled with fear right now about that future that never seems to come. Because it's always present when it does, just like the past was present when it was past. It was never past, it was always present. Oy vey.
I'm actually embarrassed because I thought he said juxtaposition, like just juxtapose, not justification. That's why I was saying, when's the last time you used it? I had the wrong word. Not that it really mattered, but to me,
Well, it matters if you're trying to define something.
well, also because I was feeling bad that I never used that word. I'm like, fuck, I gotta use juxtapose. What does it? That's where you put two things in the opposite position. But he said justification, I think.
Well, let's use that word for a second. I'm going to suggest that perfection is always present. And within the relative scheme, what distinguishes things within the present is their distinctive qualities. So we have bodies, we have eyes, we stand upright, we speak, we think about our thinking, etc. That sort of defines humans, very crudely, but defines humans. So those distinctions are identifying markers of things that seem to separate us, but they don't. So if you're comparing one thing to another in that regard, everything else is always going to have more or less of something that you're comparing it to, which is the creation of imperfection. If you think that each thing needs to be perfect on its own as though it's separate, rather than see that each thing is in fact part of the whole, which is perfect. May take a minute to digest, sit with, consider. So the thing the brain does, which is to compare and contrast, and that's what juxtaposition is, putting two things side by side to look at them, look at their distinctions. It's just like my thought. If I think my thought is real, all of a sudden I'm in a fight for its life when it doesn't have one. If I think each one of those things is real separate from the other and distinct from the other, I start looking at them and seeing the comparative analysis as something that makes one better than the other,
Yes, I
one
love
more
it.
than the other, one less than the other, etc. Now, if I can make more or less of things and realize that neither of those positions is tenable because the thing remains the thing as it is, when I compare the thing to itself, it's always perfect because there are no differences. There are no comparative advantages
Or
because
you just go one step farther, is the advanced class where it doesn't really matter. That's where I'm at. Like, I don't really care if there's differences. It doesn't matter. I don't have to make such a big deal out of it.
well, it's funny that you probably go into your house through the same door and not the neighbors on a pretty regular basis. So while you may think that to kind of write off the general discussion here, you're relying on it constantly.
To not make such a big deal out of it?
No, to think that nothing matters. Nothing in the absolute matters, but when it comes to our human experience, things matter.
Nothing matters.
Yes. Nothing does matter because if there wasn't nothing, there'd be no room for anything within the realm of the universe.
Juxtapose.
But the difference, Anthony, everyone, when I think my thoughts are real, I think they're all that matter. And think of what matter does: takes space, blocks light, and I create shadows of doubt as a result. I cast shadows of doubt on my own experience because I think what matters is so critical to my life. And it's
Why
the
do
life
some
of
people
us.
go out of their way to get attention? Like they just have to, they crave it so much.
I would leave you to answer that more than anyone else here.
Yeah, let's have you answer it, Anthony.
I don't know why.
That's a great question. Answer it.
I think because I wanted to prove something to my mom.
But your mom's not here right now, so why are you still doing it?
She is.
Okay, that's true.
But not
I
the
like
way
when the
Anthony
teacher says,
thinks about her.
okay, I like when the teacher says, can everybody please be more like Anthony?
There were probably two Anthonys in the class. So again, while we can diverge and distract, if the essence of our essence is essential, where would it be but here and now with each of us and everyone else and everything else?
So does that mean 2 dimensions? There's only a here and a now. You sounded like you limited it a little bit there. Was that intentional?
Well, there and then are only thoughts about places that aren't here and
So
now.
there's only a here and now. That's it. There's not possible. There's just a here and now. That's it. 2 spots.
Yep.
Either you're here or you're now.
You can think what you want. If reality is reality, it's reality regardless of what we think. There's the ultimate freedom. We don't need to think about it for it to be. We don't need to think about it to utilize it. We don't need to concede it to finally have it. We've had it all along while we haven't been conceding it. It's just starting to notice the problems in life are coming from what we're thinking about life, not coming from life. We're causing those conflicts by thinking of them in ways we think are true and think are real, while not noticing that the conflicts we're creating are telling us we're not thinking straight. The consequences we're creating that are disturbing are telling us we're thinking something that is disturbing. And what greater form of thought could that be than to make believe we're creating reality with our thinking? Meaning there is no other reality, and then wondering why we feel alone in the universe.
Have you ever
In a
yelled at somebody in public, Jeff?
That you can remember.
Have you seen Anthony in public?
I don't yell. I don't think I've ever yelled at anyone in public.
Really?
Have you?
Yes.
I know Gabe hasn't.
I bet Jana has.
Not lately. Not lately.
I'm behind 2 gates in the jungle.
As it should be.
Actually, I'm at a hotel right now on the west side. I'm at the West End, and believe me, there's 9 million tourists. So if I'm ever gonna be here now, this will be it. The
Well,
waves are huge.
the here and the now is the present. And if presence is the essence of existence, and you can start noticing this by just, if you think you're not where you are, ask yourself, where am I? And look
Yeah.
at your feet, look at your body, look at all of the indications will support the contention that you're always where you are. And if that is the case, we are not somewhere else because we're thinking of that other place. We are simply thinking about something, but making believe we are somewhere else because we're thinking about it once again reinforces this idea that our thoughts are reality and that we go where we think. Isn't it interesting? We could make believe that we're not where we are and only going where we think we are, while the whole time we are always where we are. Think
It's
of
like
the
putting
deception in that.
GPS your same location where you're at and expecting to go somewhere.
Think of the expectations we have of thinking to be able to qualify us to be. We've developed a whole language trying to support the contention that we don't belong where we are, shouldn't have what we have.
You don't have to be in the circus. You could just be watching it from the grandstands, a different angle. I think that's what Les was trying to say, right? You don't have to be in the parade. You could just watch it go by.
Or you could just be the parade.
Yeah, but that's the choice. That's what Les, I didn't want to tell him, but that's what I knew he was. I know he's known that for a while, but that's the neat feeling is when you're like, I could just watch from over here for free.
Is this just because Les said a couple weeks ago that he likes you now?
Yeah, damn it. Janet knows me. It's
And
good
you're
when you have
just taking
1%. She
such
just
a-
weeded that out. Like, what?
Because Les broke down and gave you a compliment.
But he
now you're
didn't
all
say
over
that.
poor Les.
I brought that up again after. It turned out he backed out of it. You weren't there, but the next meeting I called him on that and he backed out.
I think you should buy him a new car.
Right?
Yeah. Or give him one of your 73s.
All right, but let's
that you
not
already have.
divulge. This has been very helpful. This whole thing, realizing that I thought I didn't have to listen to this meeting. I wasn't going to come because I realized I knew everything, but it was so, thank God I didn't listen to myself. Fuck.
Well, to that point, Anthony, it's easy to mistake the difference between what we think we know and what we know. And Jackie, this goes back to what we sort of broached 2 weeks ago, I think it was. If we have a knowing awareness, there's no unknowing in it. There's no mistaking in it. There's no misthinking in it. There's no wrong in it, because it's absolutely essence of existence. It isn't an option. It's not negotiable. It doesn't come or go.
Like, give me an
Thoughts are-
example of that. I don't even know what you're talking about. What's an example?
I got
Just-
it. I got it. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. I get that this is difficult to comprehend because it's incomprehensible. And if you begin to realize that mind with a capital M is pure consciousness, it isn't our brain thinking, it isn't our body acting.
That sounds good.
It isn't the human population. Those are all byproducts of possibility that exist within the realm of this seeming relative universe.
That's Jack
talking
yelling
about-
at somebody in public. You're in my way.
So we're talking about mind, capital M, omniscience. There's no exceptions. Omnipotence, no exceptions. Omnipresence, no exceptions. It's starting to see that this is what we've been talking about in terms of God, in terms of the infinite, in terms of the absolute all along. And it's the essence of existence. We don't have to think about it for it to be that at all. There's freedom. And to begin to concede that is to begin to reduce the idea of what thinking means to very, very little, because it simply becomes something we're capable of doing, not something we have to do in all cases, not something that we have to have in all cases, just something we do.
So is
Thinking is
freedom
something
is the same thing as having nothing to lose? Just another name for it?
In absolute terms, there is nothing to lose and nothing to find, because there cannot be any more or less of it. It's just infinite. It's not based on a mathematical formula or a dimensional state at all. It's an absolute state of being. It's beingness rather than havingness.
Oh, get it, Anthony? That's right up your alley.
Yes, this is great stuff.
Well, your dad conceded that at one point. At least he conceded that the possibility existed beyond the ideas he was having that he was fighting for.
Life
How old
changing.
was
That
he?
was life
How
changing
old was
moment.
he? How old was he, Anthony? 93?
Yeah.
So with all the years he had spent, he had the capacity to say, oh, maybe there is something bigger.
And so is my
what am I
mom.
fighting
They were
for?
married 70 years, and 2 days after he passed away, she had a stroke. Like, she died of a broken heart. 70 years they were married, and 2 days later, she had a stroke.
He just took her with him. So thinking of an infinite source is to begin to see that there is no beginning or end to it, so there is no death in it. There is no limitation in it. There is no more or less in it. Those are all consequences of thinking about life, thinking about infinite, thinking about absolute nature. They're not what we think they are. What we think they are is what we think. They are, just as we are as we are. And we share that in common between all things that are and all things that is.
And knowing
Things that are and things that is.
and knowing my mom, he didn't take her with her. She went. I know, sure.
Wait,
She
what
didn't.
was
He
the
did.
second part? All things that are
Sorry.
and all things that aren't? Was that what you said?
No, sorry, all things that are and everything that is.
Everything that is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they're the beings, and we talk about inanimate objects as not having life. They're actually based on the same molecular structure that we are. They may be varied in some way, but there's molecules and cells and all that seeming
Yes.
subatomic structure that runs them. And inanimate objects, while we feel superior
Yes.
to them because we think they don't think, know exactly what to do because they're based on that knowing nature without having a brain to think about it. Rocks know
Yes.
that they're rocks. They don't think about being a rock. They just know what to do without any thought whatsoever. So you don't have any contention. Rocks don't say, you know what, I'm not going to be a rock today.
And they don't have to eat.
Yeah. But they're fed literally by the essence of this same essence, that subatomic structure that we can't seem to figure out because harder we look, the more complicated it seems to get. We can concede right now is operating exactly as it's operating without any doubt whatsoever. It's doing what it's doing, has been doing that for as long as it's been doing that, which seems to us to be a long time, but to the space and time it's taken, it's of no time whatsoever because it's all present here now. It's not thinking about the past. It's not thinking about getting old. It isn't thinking at all. It's just simply doing what it's doing in the present as it is present, which allows it to be present in our experience. They're all metaphors or metaphoric for this other greatness that we share, that it would be contained in all things, all that are and all that is. So if you think of that as profound, That means for finding. When I look for things that aren't lost, I always find them and see that it was only my thinking about them that was lost. The lost cause was the idea I had nothing to do with it, and my thinking being the cause, I ignored and made believe had nothing to do with the feeling I was having. So I am never a lost cause, but I can have thoughts that are lost, that the cause of the feeling of lost is the thought I'm having that is lost. Lost meaning I have an idea about something that isn't true as truth. I think it's real. I think it's true. I think it defines me. All of a sudden, I become what I think, and I become what I do. And people say, well, that's just who I are. Yeah, I am, just as an excuse to not do anything else.
Quick,
That's
quick,
rationalization.
quick question, Jack.
Good
Wh-
one.
When my friend said he had no concept of what a mental obsession is, isn't that ultimately where we want to be? Not be an expert on it, but just have no clue, like, don't even know what a mental obsession is. Isn't that better?
Who
Not
cares?
if you're not if you're thinking obsessively mentally and making believe you don't know.
Not if you're in denial.
How could it be, Anthony, that the world is functioning on this basis largely, if not totally?
What's the
And
worst thing that
some
you did? Let's say somebody says, okay, what's the worst thing that mental obsession did for you, Jack? What was so bad about it? What is it?
you tell me.
For
Where are
me,
you coming?
for me, I realized through this meeting, I could have said to him, do you ever talk to yourself? And he would have said, yeah. I go, okay, that's mental obsession, buddy. What are you talking to yourself for? Like, who talks to themselves? That's
I do.
crazy.
I totally do.
Right. Everybody does. Like, if you're talking to yourself and you don't know what mental obsession is, we got a problem here.
You're just thinking to your thoughts. That's accurate to what's happening. I can talk to my thoughts, but
I
all
have
I'm
whole
doing is
conversations. My
all
life
I'm
is based on the relationship between me and my thoughts. That's who we are.
well, again, you're defining the obsession, Anthony. You're asking me what I do, and you're describing exactly what it is.
Well, yeah.
Forward progress.
So it's no different for me when I make believe thoughts are true. I make believe I'm the creator of reality.
I
That means
love
there is no other.
my friend Larry in AA. He used to say, when somebody comes to me,
And then this.
when my friend he said, when somebody comes up to me and says they've been to hell, he goes, it's not something I read about in a book. He goes, I know where they've been. I know what they're talking about. That's kind of where mental
And yet,
obsession is.
and yet you ask what it is.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
because I
So,
want to clarify it. I want to make sure we're on the same page.
We're all
well,
tortured by it. That's why we're here.
Torture, that's the fucking word.
in our words, Anthony, we're never going to be on the same page because we're each writing our own narrative.
Yeah, but it's possible we can. Don't eliminate everything is possible.
And it's possible to think impossibility is possible too.
Yes, I love it. Let's go.
So if you're following me here in the spirit of what I'm saying rather than the words I'm using,
Words are
the point
everything.
is that where the essence of our existence doesn't change, it's the absolute nature of nature. So there is no change there. The only thing that's changing is our thinking about it that's causing the conflicts. So it doesn't matter how I say that to you for you to have a clear
Is there
understanding of what it
anybody
is.
that doesn't talk to themselves? Is there a person who goes, talk to yourself? Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? Or does every person talk to themselves?
I didn't always. I mean, I just lived such a quiet life. I'm wandering around saying, "Oh, I need to plant those tomatoes," or "Hey, kitten, how are you?" I mean, just because no one's. It's just because no
You
one else
remember
is
what
around.
happened last time you planted those? The deer ate those. You start having that conversation.
No, I have no fear anymore about that stuff. There's no deers that can get inside my gate.
So that was a metaphoric I was using.
Yeah, I'm not going for it.
So it sounds like we're done.
Yeah, I got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it.
Did you get some dopamine jabs there when you were being an idiot? That's why you do it. It's physiological. You do something, everyone goes completely silent because they're like, "Here goes Anthony again," and you go, "Bing."
It's just fun. We should be having fun. It's not so serious. If it's too serious where we can't laugh, something's wrong.
Well, if it's disturbing and we're laughing at it, something's wrong too.
That's
And
true.
within the context of justification, it's easy to pretend because we can celebrate that everyone else is happy. And there is enough going on, I would say, in this world to reckon with and acknowledge and to notice that is not happy that is actually
Tortured.
incredibly depraved. And to look at that honestly would be to also look at the same experience we're having honestly, rather than try to avoid it, try to run from it, try to ignore it. Ignorance is not bliss. It gives temporary, just like
Yeah,
heroin
why
is
is
not
Gabe so
bliss.
silent? Is Gabe really there? Gabe, are you there?
Yes,
All
listening.
right. Can you close this meeting for us, buddy? I miss hearing from you.
See you next week. Thanks for coming.
Oh, it is nice to hear your voice, Gabe.
Yeah,
Hi.
Gabe, we miss you. Like, you can't pretend you're not there. Just a word, Gabe. It's not the same.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate your voices.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Are you okay, Gabe?
Are you all right, buddy?
Yeah.
We love you, Gabe.
Yeah,
You're a
Gabe.
Thanks.
favorite.
Love you guys too. Just listening.
Aw.
It's nice to hear other people's voices besides my own.
Oh.
In my head
See-
or otherwise.
Talking to yourself.
Yep.
Oh, Gabe.
No, I'm good.
Good.
So while these other 167 hours or so during the week are available, listen to your experience. Listen to the signs you're getting. Listen to the alarms, the bells, the whistles that are going off in your own experience. Listen to them. I mean, I'm telling you to do something. You don't have to, obviously, you're absolutely free not to do this.
I'm
but
trying to quiet them
suggesting-
down. Personally, when I hear you say listen, I'm like, no, I'm trying to not hear them anymore is the reason.
Well, you can't quiet something down that you continue to maintain. So the point of listening is starting to be aware of what you're doing so that you can begin to take credit for doing it rather than disavow
I like
having
that
anything
part.
to do with
Take
it.
credit's good.
Start taking credit for what you're doing that is depraved and degenerative and disgusting in your own estimation, because self-loathing and self-hate is all coming out of this. The seeming self we have hate for we're equally trying to love it.
And what's on the very opposite side of self-loathing?
The juxtaposition of it, is that what you're trying to get at?
I'm going to use that. How many points is that word worth again today? If we for the 160 hours, if we use that.
So when you're not in the conversation, you're able to notice your experience just by checking in and saying, what is my experience right now? Rather than try to think it shouldn't be happening, begin to give yourself credit for creating it and making it happen, rather than think of it as some vicarious byproduct and convergence of all other things happening as they should be in relation to what shouldn't be happening to you.
Trust me, the only thing I think about all week is it's Sunday yet. What time is it? This meeting is so important. It's so important, Jack. You don't realize. I mean, I thought I didn't need this stuff. It's life changing. It's life changing.
You don't need it. And life doesn't change.
That's a takeaway close.
Life is a constant. Love is a constant. Any principled basis in reality are absolutely never changing whatsoever. What we think about them changes. And to ignore the fact that we are the choosers of those thoughts, even if some people believe we're not responsible for the first thought, let's say that's the case, we're responsible for continuing to entertain that thought. And I would say the reason we think we're not responsible for that thought is because we think when we're not thinking about what we're thinking, that we're not thinking what we're thinking, that we have this sort of vicarious nature attacking us and operating our brain against us. And I would say that's absolutely just a new justification.
Let me ask you a question then.
There's nothing we have anything to do with it. And as a result, there's nothing we can do about it.
If the sun is going to be around for X billion years, but eventually the sun is gone, is this infinite source that you have, does that have a timeline, or that's just infinite source is infinite and never ends? But even though the sun is going to end in billions of years, the infinite source goes on, right?
So, Jack, when you said responsible, I got this little tick of like anxiety for a second. And usually I have a parade because that's my biggest gift. And I'm always singing about the fact that I found, or whatever the fuck, I already have it, but that I was more peaceful after I was exposed to the responsibility for all that there is with no loopholes whatsoever. And we haven't talked about it for a while and at no fault or whatever. But when you just said it, I got this weird little tinge. I wonder what that's all about.
Noticing something you may not be paying attention to up until now.
Wow. It was just for a second, but it was just very clear, like, oh, why would I feel that way about that? That's weird.
But you notice it, right?
I did, yes.
It's clear. So generally speaking, in my experience, what I used to do with those is push them back and try to keep them under that ground I was keeping them beneath so I could say they weren't there. And think about the word substance and understanding. If there's anything to understand, it's that we stand on a platform based in reality. Whether the earth is real or not, it is a possibility of reality. Whether life is in human terms is real or not is irrelevant. It's based in an absolute possibility of possibility. It's based in life, based in love, based in something that is generous enough not to smear us out because we don't think like it, but to allow us suffering sufficient to come to terms with it.
Oh.
And the discussion here, Jana, is really beginning to, this is why the listening, the point of listening is important. When we started, I wanted more conversation, and I realized that in the face of some of these things, it really is a chance to stop and just contemplate in the midst of a lot going on and continue to notice that some of the awareness we have in relation to what's actually happening is disturbing. And you may have just seen one of those little glimpses that didn't quite feel right, but you knew you were simply watching it rather than engaging with it and thinking you needed to keep it subterranean in that seeming subconscious that we call it. Isn't it interesting? We can blame the subconscious and at the same time claim we don't know anything about it. How convenient.
Subconscious is powerful. It seems to be a huge topic right now.
No, and no more than a lie is powerful. We give it the seeming power by making believe it is real. If we are absolutely aware there is no subconscious to that whatsoever, can we in human terms create something to justify we don't know what we're doing and don't have anything to do with it, so all we can keep doing is the same thing over and over again? Yes. That would be the nature of this addictive thinking that humans have been captivated by because they've been intoxicated by their ability to ignite their physiology and utilize chemicals like adrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, all those chemicals that come as a result of emergencies to have us really alert, hyper alert and hyper aware. Here we're trying in one respect to be desensitized to what we're actually doing, and in another respect trying to always become greatly aware of everything that's happening through a chemical inducement, not nature.
Right. Yeah.
Through something we're doing to exaggerate it. We're trying to maintain balance. Nothing is ever out of balance. It's always balance. So if we're doing something, we're doing a little bit here, we're doing a lot more over there, trying to think that we're not doing the little, we're doing the lot. It's like opposites. You can't have a thought that doesn't have an opposite thought until you're thinking in absolute terms, and then you realize it isn't the thinking you're doing, but the knowing you know that you're actually beginning to allow thinking to consider. So now thinking is in proper order rather than out of order because it's actually following the nature of nature, which is knowing first, thinking is a byproduct. Knowing first, expressing our thoughts is a byproduct. Knowing first, acting and doing is a byproduct. Beings are, humans do. Thinking is a doing.
Knowing that we know now is for me a relief. Like when I go, oh, I know, I like smile instead of shove it down and run from it.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Well, taking it seriously, to your point about things mattering, when I think things matter and they don't matter, they just are what I'm thinking, I take those things seriously enough to believe their reality. And I don't think it's funny when people poke fun at me personally, because the person I'm taking it as is the person that is built on that platform of creating reality in my thinking. So my persona, the imposter that I'm posing as this persona that I am, this character that I am, is very offended by anything that seems like a joke. Why? Because it's a joke. That's why I'm offended. I'm taking it seriously because it doesn't have any basis in reality.
Well, and sometimes we want to be offended.
I would say we're asking, to the point earlier about all these conditions that we create, they're awarenesses of our awareness that we know better. And the willingness we have to admit that and align with that doesn't mean we're coming to life's terms. It means we're allowing terms to be the nature of our existence rather than make believe that something else is our nature. They're already that way. All of those fractured states that we're creating in terms of the interbulation and the emotional stress and mental anguish and emotional turmoil, inner conflict, they're all byproducts of that knowing better.
But they're also
Just
familiar, so we can, like, I sometimes, like, I can go for a very long time in the knowing, and then I'll try and conjure it up. Like I somehow physiologically maybe even.
you want to be in charge of it
Fuck yeah, I do. I want to
rather
cause
than
trouble.
be thankful and grateful.
Yeah, I want to cause
So-
chaos.
To that little moment you had there, consider that a moment of clarity.
Okay.
And a moment of clarity does not always feel wondrous, but it's actually revealing a clarity of doing things that are actually seemingly blocking the wonder in the resistance to feeling the depressing nature of that thing. And when you first
Yes.
felt it, it felt awkward, right?
Yeah, for a second, yeah.
Yeah.
But you were
And
right there. It was a good time to have it. You were right there.
But well, I'm always right there. So that because the I we're talking about is the thing we share, not the thing I am as a body. Right. So in seeing that, Jana, you now can sit with ideas much differently than you might have in the past and notice that seeing the disturbance is actually the awareness of the thing you're doing rather than the thing you thought was happening to you and something you could do nothing about. And that's a little disturbing to finally, when I finally realized this, I thought, I have been creating this. That is insane. That is sick. That is sad. That is like,
Shame.
no wonder I'm filled with grief and mourning.
And shame.
Yes.
A lot of shame, but I don't do that anymore.
I'll bet you do to a degree.
No, I'm perfect. You fixed me. I'm done. This is my last meeting.
In the I, yes. So what we're dealing with here is the human dilemma of how do I take an absolute being nature that's perfect and express it in my human experience? Why do we wait for near-death experiences? And if you listen to people at the bottom of the announcement, there's several different options to listen to people's experience in near death. Why is it that we wait till that moment where things are so far beyond our comprehension to finally concede that we have an awareness that is so profound that people who are in those experiences seeming near death, when they find out they're coming back, listen to what none of them want to come back. Nobody says, I can't wait to re-enter the inner conflict and emotional turmoil and mental anguish that I have thought was natural to humans.
Yeah.
If our nature was sinful, we would be gloating over all of the worst things we could possibly do. We would be happy about that.
No, it's an incorruptible innocence is the nature of what we are.
Yes. And that's in our essence. Now, think of our human experience. Our human body has a brain. Part of the body is the brain.
Mm.
Doesn't mean we are the brain. It means we have a brain in a body. We have it. Why? We've been given responsibility for it. Why? Because we're the choosers of the thinking of that body and that brain.
Yeah, it's just our meat suit, and we're here for lessons.
So a woman I heard speak at Brentwood was 80 some years old, and she called it her spacesuit.
I remember her. I remember this. I love that story about her. She was lovely, and it always makes you smile. I love that.
Yeah. So we're operating in space and time, apparently. Our ultimate essence isn't operating in space and time. It isn't based in space and time. We're a possibility of that essence. To operate on that basis is to allow thinking to actually begin to function aligned with that knowing nature rather than maligned with it. Les was talking a lot in the last couple of weeks about alignment, like realigning his thinking. So the point is, if I'm doing it within the thinking, I'm manufacturing the effect. If I'm doing it from my knowing nature, I'm intuitively knowing how to think. all of a sudden the thinking becomes something I do naturally because I'm relying on that knowing, intimate intuition, which is wisdom and is in fact inspiration. Very different than desperation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Desperation
that's
is
what
just
we're
not
here.
attractive.
We're looking at how do we rather than wait till death to realize life, why postpone it? Why do we think it's an afterlife that we're looking forward to that is in heaven when in fact that same absolute life is here now and we're acting as though it's not? It's an act. It's a charade. It's a parade of charades.
Yeah, I get that 100%. I just think that if we ever came to the realization or the awareness of all that we talk about, we wouldn't be here anymore.
Well, we aren't here in that essence anyhow.
Right.
But while we are here, it might be worth conceding that for maybe no reason whatsoever, we are here. And if we are, maybe there's a way we could function on a basis that would be more collectively beneficial and fulfilling than the things we've been doing.
Yeah, because love, it's cumulative. That's what we should work on.
Well, I would say it's the like Les was saying, it's the undoing. It's the redoing of the things that can be undone that we think can't be undone that we're using to block that seeming path. And it isn't really blocking that path, it's blocking our willingness to take that path because we see it like in a dream, it's a pile of rocks and we go around them, constantly go around them rather than see it's imagined, it's a dream. We're only seeing rocks there, they're not really there.
It's
Sort of
willingness.
coming to terms with our capacity to imagine and come to accurate terms and realize what we do imagine doesn't have any matter within it at all.
And it
Yet
shouldn't have shame either. We shouldn't blame ourselves for having, these thoughts and stuff. And I think it's the shame that kind of blocks our willingness at times too.
it's the idea that they're real that we think shame is reality. And
Right.
what we're guilty for and we're ashamed of is the idea that those things are real because they're not. We wouldn't have guilt and feel ashamed if we didn't know better. And to begin to see that,
right.
you begin to see that, it kind of completes the circle and you realize, oh, the whole is always whole. It is never apart. We're never disconnected from it. It's what we're thinking that's disconnected. It's what we're thinking that has no basis that gives us the impression we're alone in the universe, that we need to struggle and strive to reconnect and etc. So love you guys.
Love you. Bye, Jack. Thank you. Bye,
Thank
Jackie. I love you,
you.
honey.
See you,
Bye.
kids.
I love you.
Bye, Jen. I love you.
Love you, honey.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everybody.